Welcome, everyone, to Hands-on Politics. We're not a left or right thing. We're a constitutional thing. A couple of brothers out of the Bronx talking politics at the kitchen table, I guess, or in front of Zoom, whatever you want to call it. Ken, how are you?
Rich, I'm doing fantastic, and I hope you're doing well, too. And I also hope that all of our supporters out there are doing great and had a great Thanksgiving. And Rich, there's so much happening in the news today. I think we need to get right into the show. The first topic I'd like to talk about is the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. That's a $1.2 trillion expenditure. And Rich, before I get into it, I want to ask you a question. What do you think of when you hear the word infrastructure?
Well, like all of us, when I travel in the summertime with my camper to the campsite, I get stuck in traffic quite often because they're paving the highway or they're putting in a new bridge, underpass, something new that has to do with roads, bridges, our ports. Those things to me, that's kind of what I think about when I think about infrastructure.
Exactly. Your understanding is the same as my understanding. And I think it's the same understanding that most Americans have when you hear about infrastructure. But let me just say that what is in this infrastructure is not what you and I and most people think should be in infrastructure. Okay, Rich, I'm now going to spend some time going over a few aspects of the bill so that you get an idea where the money is going to. We are spending $65 billion on high-speed internet. The federal government should not be spending money on high-speed internet. The private sector should be. We're spending money on public transportation, $39 billion. This is what we're essentially doing is subsidizing people who ride on trains and buses. We are spending $7.5 billion on electric vehicle charging networks. This means that if you own a electric vehicle, they're going to be putting electric vehicle stations all over the country. When we rolled out the automobile, the federal government was not responsible for putting gas stations all over the country, and we shouldn't be, or taxpayers should not be responsible for that expense now. We are spending $65 billion on alternative fuel infrastructure. The biggest problem with things like solar power and wind power and turbine power of the different various types is that we don't have an infrastructure to handle that. Well, the federal government should allow the private sector to figure all that out. They shouldn't be taking $65 billion of taxpayer money to go toward this expenditure. If it's worth it, the private sector will do it. We are also spending $55 billion on clean water. That might sound nice, except when you consider the fact that clean water is a responsibility of localities or counties or states. It's not the responsibility of the federal government. If Detroit or Michigan can't get their water clean, they need to figure it out. My tax dollars should not go from Georgia up to Michigan to solve problems that incompetent Democrats in those states and in those localities can't figure out. So these are just some of the places where our money is going. But I'll tell you what, this is not the traditional idea of infrastructure that most people have. Now, before anybody says, well, Ken, are you against high-speed internet? Or are you against public transportation being affordable? Or are you against an alternative fuel infrastructure? No. The question is, who is responsible for paying it? Now, why am I so concerned about the federal government getting involved in every aspect of our lives? And that's because a government that is big enough to give you everything you want is big enough to take away everything you have. So that's number one. Number two, the U.S. Constitution is very, very clear on it. The federal government does not have these roles or responsibilities. And why are they involved in every aspect of our lives?
There's one answer, and it's simple: control. Anytime they have funding at any level in any sector, what has been the tactic in the past for their ability to get people to do what they want? they talk about cutting off funding. So they get the cities and the localities, they get them tied into this funding source. I mean, I don't know if you remember back Clinton's funding the police from the federal level, remember the basketball, the night basketball and all that. It's that same concept that, hire all these police, will give you the funds. And now when we threaten you to pull the funds, now the question is, does the local politician or the state politician now want to take the political heat for reducing the amount of police on the street? Or are they going to do what the federal government is suggesting they need to do now, which is expand the program with their own funds? So no matter what it is, what we're looking at is control. And this is what the founders always talked about with centralized government. It's an evil. They talked about the government being an evil, and we're seeing that evil because it's, people might say, oh, the word evil is very strong, but it really isn't. When we look, when the government is working on these types of bills to take control, what that does, it just naturally takes away our freedom. And when we talk about individual freedom and all of the important things in the Constitution, these types of government programs undermine our ability to be free. They take, any time tax dollars are taken from us, they're taking our property. Money is property. We go out and we work, we earn a wage. From that wage, they take taxes. The more taxes they take, the less we can do for ourselves. That equals reducing our freedom, because the less money we have, the less opportunities we have to start a business, to feed our families, put roofs over our heads. So what they are doing is creating this big behemoth. They don't care what it is. They're not trying to help us. What they're trying to do is undermine the freedom of the people so that they can control what happens in our lives. And it's really that simple. It's all under the guise of infrastructure, build back better, healthcare, you name it. It doesn't matter what the program is. The government doesn't give a damn about your life. What they care about is undermining your freedom. So if you're going to analyze like you did, it's real simple. It comes down to control, taking away your freedom. And that's what Democrats are really focused on, especially the left. But Republicans have been just as problematic in this. Oh, it's going to grow a little less. We'll take a little less freedom this time instead of more freedom. That's kind of my take on it.
Rich, you made a lot of great points. One thing I want to talk a little bit more about is their claim that the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act will in fact create jobs. So this Infrastructure and Jobs Act claims that it's going to create millions of jobs. So let's think about this for a minute. If the federal government takes $10,000 from you in taxes, $10,000 that you maybe use to buy a boat, or maybe it's a down payment on a house, or maybe it's a new car, or maybe it's clothes, or maybe it's travel. When they take that money from your pocket, you are no longer going to have that money to support people who have a job in the housing industry, or in the car industry, or the boating industry, or the travel industry. They take that money from you, and now they're going to give it to their people who are going to support them politically. They give that $10,000 to them. They are going to create jobs there, but they are destroying the jobs that you were supporting with your money originally. So they're not creating any new jobs. They're destroying the jobs that you're supporting so that they can create jobs for people who support them.
I have one word for you when it comes to creating jobs for the environment, or new energy, whatever you want to call it. And to your point, Ken, I think conservatives more than anybody want to protect the environment, whether that's hunting, fishing, camping, you name it, conservatives, they want to practically keep the environment healthy. They have no argument with that. But I have one word for you with climate change and the government getting involved: Solyndra. Do you remember Solyndra? I think they made solar panels, or they made some kind of green energy technology.
Mm-hmm.
And the government, it was under the Obama administration, and they funded Solyndra with all government money. And as they pulled out the government money, guess what happened? The company failed, because what happens when the federal government invests in things like this? Of course, there's going to be somebody there to say, sure, we'll take that money and we'll give it a try, because there's no risk, right? Yep. So you're going to give us $10 billion to come up with solar panels so that we can replace carbon fuels. So if I'm a entrepreneur, which capitalism creates, and I'm a friend of the administration pushing this, sure, I'll take the $10 billion, I'll build a factory, I'll put in some machines, we'll give this a try. I'm going to pay myself really well because I'm the CEO, and I'm going to pay my workers, and it's going to be a jobs program. But at the end of the day, there's no risk. So there's no worry about reward. When the money runs out, it's not my money. I just made, $10 billion flowed through my company that I could share with me, my investors, and my friends, and the people trying to make some solar panels. And when the money runs out, we'll go somewhere else. So when you have federal money in these climate, under the guise of, whatever, climate change and all this garbage that they use, all they're doing is funding things that they take those funds and they put them into their friends first, people that support them, their donors. They put the money in their companies that are trying to go after, new technologies. Now, don't get me wrong. I would love to see solar panels and electric vehicles work. Yep. And we wouldn't have to use fossil fuels, and we could heat our homes with that. I would love it if they come up with that technology. But right now, that industry, solar, wind, is a minuscule amount of the energy that we need to run our infrastructure, whether that's our power grid, whether it's our cars, our factories, whatever it is. The technology is not there yet. It's a corrupt system, but to your point, the climate change is being utilized as a way to take away freedom, reward friends, and say that they're doing something for climate change under the guise of control. It's a really scary thing, because so many, when you look at somebody who's a climate change activist, somebody like that little girl, I forget what her name was,
Greta Thunberg, or something like that. Yeah.
I feel so sad for that girl that she's so worried about something that we've been told is going to happen for 30 years. We're supposed to be underwater right now. Me and you should be, our beaches should be gone, all these, doomsday things. Our young population is being boondoggled into thinking the world in the next 10 years is going to be destroyed if we don't fund these climate change efforts. And it's a really sad thing, because I want to have a real conversation about it. I want to have a conversation. I don't mind energy, having a comprehensive energy plan. I'm not against new energy. I'm just against destroying our economy over some model that somebody created in some lab to say that carbon is going to destroy everything. The water's going to rise. Everything's going to be underwater. That kind of stuff doesn't work for me. And I think our young population in particular has been boondoggled by this argument. And anybody that talks against it is considered a denier. And I'm not denying anything. I'm all for progress. I just want the progress to be legitimate, not government driven.
Yeah. Rich, you made many, many excellent points. And I want to go back to one of them. And that has to do with the federal government offering companies money to invest in environmentally friendly technologies. And I'm going to use an example. As you know, I worked for 30 plus years. Was very, very proud of their green fleet. And what a green fleet means is that we had vehicles out there that were powered by electricity as opposed to going to the gas station and pumping gas into the vehicle. Now, a typical package car costs about $50,000. Now, these alternative fuel vehicles cost $70,000, $80,000, $90,000. Now, do you think would voluntarily invest in vehicles that are almost twice as expensive as their typical vehicle? No. But when the federal government or the state government would offer them $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 as a subsidy for purchasing electric vehicles or other alternative vehicles, they did that. Okay, so did not invest $70,000, $80,000, $90,000 in these alternative fuel vehicles out of the goodness of their hearts. They did it because they were subsidized. And that happens all the time with companies. We like to say, look at how these companies are investing in these alternative energy solutions. But that's not really the case. It is US taxpayers with our tax dollars subsidizing these Fortune 500 companies to invest in these alternative vehicles. Rich, you have made so many great points. I want to go back to another one you made earlier, and it was about the federal government wanting to control people. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And it's not only federal governments, it's certain state governments want to do the same thing. If you recall, a couple of years ago, we were told we just need to shut down the economy essentially for 2 weeks. If we do that, then we can control the number of people having COVID and we won't overrun the hospitals and things like that. And we need to do this in our own best interest, right? Since that time, we've had state governments doing things like outlawing church gatherings. They have outlawed weddings and funerals. They have outlawed family get-togethers of 6 or more. They have outlawed in-person schooling and dancing and graduations. And they've even had the audacity to outlaw being at your parents' bedside on their deathbed. Imagine that. Your parent is dying and the state government is saying you cannot go into their room and be with them while they're dying. Now, many of these rules have been pulled back, but this tells you what they're willing to do. And just the other day, we learned of something else that the federal government is looking to do. This is a Biden proposed strategy to control COVID. They are proposing that everyone entering the country be tested for COVID 1 day before boarding the flights. This is even if you have had the COVID vaccine. They then want you to be tested again 3 to 5 days later after you get into the United States. And there was even the suggestion that people should quarantine for 7 days. This would clearly be a violation of our civil liberties. Not only that, it is absolutely unconstitutional. There is nothing that gives the president the authority to force people to be tested for any type of illness. Another thing that it tells us is that the federal government and Joe Biden clearly have no confidence in the vaccine. They tell everybody you got to get the vaccine, but at the same time, they say, even if you've had the vaccine, we're going to test you 24 hours before you come back into the United States. We're going to test you 3 to 5 days later. And we might even, if there's not a whole lot of pushback, we might even force you to quarantine for 7 days. This tells you that when they are trying to force the American people to get the vaccine against their will, it tells you that they, the federal government, don't even have confidence in the vaccine because they're forcing you to get tested even after you've gotten the vaccine. It goes back to the federal government and state governments trying to take control. And those of you who want a federal government that can give you everything you want, these are examples of the federal government being so big it can take away everything you have, including your rights. And Rich, this needs to stop right now.
Yeah, and the first thing I'm going to say is, sure, make me quarantine. How are they going to control that? Unless they're going to put me in the cell, I'm going to tell them, take a walk. I'm just going home. Whatever. This COVID-19 has shown all of America that has their eyes open the corruption to the core. Greg Gutfeld yesterday on the 5 spoke about this, what is it, Omicron or whatever this
Omicron,
newest
yeah.
Omicron, whatever it is. And he said, why are people, all of a sudden you see this elevated fear factor in the media? And he says, here's what they're doing. It's called one variable. They're looking at one variable of the story. So what's the storyline? New variant, unknown. It's like, we've got to look at this, be afraid. It's brand new. It just came in. Instead of leading with, why are we even concerned about this Omicron? Because what we know so far, it's the weakest strain that has come through. They almost didn't know it was a strain because the symptoms are so light. It goes after people right now. What they've seen in South Africa is younger people, 40 and below. And who is our strongest, in general, population immune from the really first strains of COVID are the young people. They had no problems with it. This has been the biggest corrupt story to gain control, and it has exposed the media for what it is. It is a extension of big government that wants to control our lives. And I'm talking about the big three, the ABCs, the CBS, the NBCs, the main outlets. There are some cable outlets, even Fox. Their coverage of this has been pathetic. Everything is what I encourage anybody that's watching this, when you're watching any of this, keep your eye on what's not being said. Go deeper. Don't even, when they talk about it, listen and go find the data behind this. I've been watching the data on COVID since the beginning, because when Trump agreed to shut this economy down for 2 weeks, I almost went ballistic. I was like, why? Wait, look at the data. Even in the early days, we knew that it was attacking elderly and the infirm. It remains that way. And we have, once we got the vaccines were supposed to be the answer, where people still get COVID with the vaccine, just like if they get the flu shot, they can get the flu. It's a slightly less version for most people. But this has been the biggest scam the government has ever perpetrated on the American people, with the help of the big media to scare the living Jesus out of everybody so that they will comply. And what I'm saying is, I'm not saying it's a conspiracy, whatever. All I'm saying is, look at the data and look at the people. Ken, you had COVID. My wife had COVID. Dozens of friends, family have had COVID. And the worst cases are the flu. Have people died from COVID? Absolutely. But the people who have died would have died. A lot of people would have been subject to that with a strong flu strain. So it saddens me, because what we're seeing in this uptick of fear is that everybody's like, oh my God, I can't go through another shutdown. It is really impacting the mental health
Absolutely.
of the American people, and people who already have mental health issues, anxiety, depression. I feel for them, because this is to me, it's corruption, and it's malice beyond belief. We are hurting people. We are scaring people. We are getting people all riled up for absolutely nothing. And I say that, we could do this with the flu. We could have done this with
Absolutely.
SARS. We could
Yeah.
do this with pneumonia. We could do this with don't get in your car accidents, don't eat this, heart attacks. I mean, I'm just so disappointed in the American people.
Yeah.
That we're not looking at the data and just shut off the TV. And when Biden says he's going to do, quarantine, I'm not quarantining.
Yeah.
I'm telling you right now, I'm not quarantining. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
testing. I got my vaccine because of my particular work circumstance. But I know a few people that have gotten the vaccine that have had health issues since. So I caution, you need to talk to your doctor about the vaccine. That's all I'm saying. It's a personal choice. And it's time to just say no. Let's go with Nancy Reagan and say, when the government says wear masks, just say no. When the government says close your business, just say no. When the government says you have to test for XYZ, you can't go to a wedding, you can't go to a funeral, just ignore them. It is time to just move on from this and put the government back in the place where it belongs. You work for me.
That's right.
I don't work for you or listen to you. This is America, and I will do what I will do.
Yeah. Rich, you are on fire. I couldn't agree more with you on all of your points. And right here on my pieces of paper, the notes that I wrote down before our show, I have most of the points that you made. Let me just touch on a couple of them. Like you, I mentioned that if you're a phobic, a neurotic, or a hypochondriac, the media will make you feel like you need to jump off a roof. And so the fear mongering, it has to stop. Also, regarding survival rates, people from the ages of 0 to 19 have a 99.997% survival rate. That means 3 people out of 100,000 people die if they get COVID. And this includes people who have comorbidities or are infirm in some way. And people from 20 to the age 49, they have a 99.98% survival rate, which means 12 out of 100,000 people die with COVID or from COVID. Although we know that's not true because they count anybody that has COVID as having died from COVID. So if you get into a terrible car accident and your head gets chopped off and you had COVID, you get counted in the COVID number. So the survival rate is so high for the overwhelming majority of people. Another point that's very similar to what you said is way back in 2020, we knew that the most vulnerable to COVID were the elderly and the infirm. And we said way back then that we need to take steps to protect them. But there was absolutely no reason at all at any time to shut down the whole economy. So let me just give you my summary of the whole situation. I support anybody who voluntarily decides to get the COVID vaccine. Anybody. I support anyone who decides to wear a mask if they do so voluntarily. But this is because I support freedom. Okay. I want people to have the freedom to do whatever they think they need to do to protect themselves. Now, I am totally against the government or business coercing people to be vaccinated or to wear masks. I'm against the government or businesses firing people from jobs because they are not vaccinated. I'm against the government and business requiring ID cards to travel or to work or go to sporting events. I'm against these things because they are unconstitutional. They take away our freedoms. They give government and business more and more power over individuals, and that's wrong. And for the record, everything that the government has done to make us safer has not worked. Let me repeat that. Nothing they have done has made us any safer. For example, more people have died in 2021 than in 2020. And let me remind you, for much of 2020, we did not have a vaccine. For most of 2021, we have had a vaccine, but yet in 2020, 385,000 people supposedly died from COVID. But in 2021, 386,000 people have died from COVID. So, Rich, going back to your point about just saying no, we are talking about saying no to government mandates. If you want to take steps to protect yourself in any way you think is going to protect yourself, go for it. We're not discouraging anybody from voluntarily getting the vaccine or wearing masks, but we are telling people that they need to take a stand against the government, forcing them to do things that they don't want to do.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%, Ken. It's really disappointing that America, the home of the individual, where that individual, rugged, we survive through everything. To see what we've allowed to happen is very disappointing in many ways. But if you think about Omicron and whatever it is, in particular, that's not even a crisis. That's a created crisis. Yeah. So not only now are they taking advantage of things that happen, they're creating the things that now they're going to react to. So now they're in full control of creating crisis. And it's really sad to see. And I heard a virologist saying that I kind of look at all the data. I read it all. I read the, Fauci should be thrown off the air. That man is just pathetic. He's a detriment to science. But I was listening to a virologist say that this might actually be a good thing because it's so weak that the more people that get it, it's creating natural immunity that people are going to survive anyway. And it's really the only way this is going to truly get better, and the way it would have gotten better, is, to your point, protect the people who it could really impact and let everybody else get it. And everybody's immunity will know what to look for. And you're done with it. And the vaccines, they help to some degree from what we've seen. The data says there is some help in keeping hospitalizations down, but that's truly for the people that are already vulnerable. It really, if I have a vaccine and I'm healthy, if I didn't have the vaccine, is it much different? We don't know. It could have been, maybe not, who knows, depending on the variant. But this whole COVID experience is really changing the relationship, as you said, with the federal government and it's really a mind change. What they're trying to do is to get people to look to the federal government for answers. It's just another ruse, and people tend to listen. People who aren't political tend to listen to that and go, oh, there they go again. That's a conspiracy. The government. Well, all you have to do is look around the world, and Germany just put in that unvaccinated people can no longer go to restaurants, can't go to food stores, they can't go anywhere. They are quarantined because they haven't been vaccinated. So when we talk about government having too much control, what we're talking about is Germany. What we're talking about is Australia. Mm-hmm. What we're talking about are the governments that we're looking at across the pond who are completely controlling their citizens and telling them what they can and can't do. That's where we're headed. It's not a conspiracy. It's already happening. Mm-hmm. And the only reason it isn't happening here right now completely is because there are people that still utilize the Constitution to stop it. To your point about these mandates, the courts are stopping all these mandates. So I think if it ever gets to the Supreme Court, mandates for vaccines are going to just get washed right away. I still have confidence that there are enough judges on the Supreme Court that when it gets there, this will be a fundamental right. I mean, if we want to talk about controlling one's body, this is the ultimate experience on that.
We have reached the end of our time, and so we're going to have to wrap it up this week. So for my brother Rich and myself, thank you for joining Hands on Politics, and we hope that you'll join us again next week. Thank you very much.